thank you for coming back. I know last week was kind of sends us all, And I want you to know I prayed specifically that who God wanted here would be here. And so thank you for being obedient. I know it was wet and cold, and it would have been just easier just to stay home. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to open us up with prayer, and then we're going to get started. God, we just thank you that you work beyond the weather. You work beyond schedules. You work way beyond what we feel comfortable with. And we are grateful for that. And so I just thank you for these ladies. I thank you that for their obedience to you. Has nothing to do with me or Ann or Jen. I thank you that they are loyal and obedient to the God of the universe. And I pray that you would use what you have given me, what you've downloaded into me to speak truth, and that you would continue to do good things. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So tonight we are going to talk about I see maybe a couple of new faces. Remember, we have been doing what we're calling UnCluttered, all right? And basically we are uncluttering these areas in our life, all right? Remember, several weeks ago we started with time. We talked about how, uncluttering our schedule and what are we using our time for. And I hope in the past 3 or 4 weeks that you've seen some fruit from some of that. And then that next week we talked about relationships, and we talked about our most important and paramount relationship is our relationship with God, right? And then we talked about our inner circle, and we talked about our outer circle. And I hope that you've seen some fruit from that. And so then the third week, 2 weeks ago, Jen was up here and we talked about uncluttering our environment, all right? And what that looks like. And I know I sat back there and just absorbed so much good of what I clutter my surroundings with and what I'm probably not dealing with because that part is cluttered, right? So tonight we're going to talk about our idols. And we're going to obviously unclutter our idols. When I say the word idol, nobody's like, oh, I'm going to admit that I have those, right? So, the other three are environment, time, relationships. Those don't sound as negative, right? But hopefully when you walked in and you knew that we were talking about idols, you know that that's not something that we as good, quote, Christian women want to admit that we have, right? We know that. But we're gonna dig into this, and I am all about giving credit where credit is due. And Jen had watched a sermon series by a pastor named Joby Martin. I don't know if any of you've heard of him, but powerful series. And one specific sermon was on smashing idols. And you can YouTube this thing if this kind of stirs your interest. And I watched kind of a breakdown of that sermon it was kind of an interview between he and a gal that was interviewing him. And so most of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight kind of comes off of that. So I want to give credit there to, again, Joby Martin is his name. And then there is a book by a man named Tim Keller, and it's called Counterfeit Gods. All right, I will admit I've never read it, but I plan on it simply as a result of preparing for this talk, because he breaks down basically the 4 idols that you see in front of you on this paper. He talks about these. All right, now like I said, I've never read the book, so he may go in different directions than I'm going to go, but I used those 4 idols as kind of the backbone, and we kind of go from there. So I want you to know about those 2 things specifically. Let me tell you a couple of things that are what I call the basic truths of idols, okay? And jot these down or just commit them however you want to do it. You can do it however you want. Here's some basic truths of an idol, all right? First one, anything that competes for the worthiness of the one true God is an idol. Okay, that's a simple definition of an idol. Anything that competes, I like that word competes, specifically for the worthiness of God in your life, okay? And like I said, we've all probably heard talks on idols and stuff, but for some reason, I really liked that very simple definition. It's something in my life that is competing for the worthiness of God in my life, all right? I love this truth, okay? An idol always requires sacrifice. An idol always requires sacrifice. I want you to jot this down because we're not going to go here tonight. But 1 Kings 18, if you have not read the story of Elijah and him up on the mountain with the prophets of Baal, I want you to do it sometime in the next 5 days, okay? It's in 1 Kings 18. And I'm telling you, every time I read it, it just, and then Joby Martin put it, it was a part of this interview, and it reminded me of that story. And Joby was talking about it, and he brought to light something that I had never thought about, but that our idols, every idol requires a sacrifice. And in that story, I'm not going to go into the whole of it just for sake of time, but in that story, the prophets of Baal have to start cutting themselves to try to get the Baal to light that thing on fire, right? If you remember the story. I mean, they are bleeding all over the thing, cutting themselves, all right? I want you to think about how our idols always require something to be sacrificed, okay? And that's going to play into what we're going to talk about tonight. All right? Here's another truth of an idol. Something will always bleed out for your idol. Something will always have to bleed out for your idol. And what I mean, I'm going back to that story in 1 Kings. The prophets of Baal were having to cut themselves and bleed out for the sacrifice of that idol, right? We're going to talk about each one of these, and there are certain things in our life that really, I believe 100% that the Holy Spirit downloaded into me that I'm allowing to bleed, that are bleeding out because I want to keep that idol, all right? It's kind of harsh there. All right, last truth about an idol. An idol has to be replaced, not just removed. I want you to think about that for a minute. An idol has to be replaced, not just removed. If I had a mantle up here and I had these idols, I can't just take them off because what will come back up there? Another idol. You see that? And I think all of us have walked this thing long enough, even our young ones in here, that you know you removed an idol from your life, and dadgummit, 6 months later, another one popped up. All right, so we're going to talk about what we're going to replace those idols with, right? All right, let's get into this. Here's something specific I want you to remember as we get into this, that our enemy hates us. We know that, right? And our enemy, he is crafty, which the word crafty actually means a deceiver or deceptive, right? And I love this. Joby Martin said this. He said, he takes the good of God and he twists it, right? And I want you to jot this down. We need to beware of the twist. We need to beware of the twist, or we need to be cognizant, we need to be aware, I probably should say that, of the twist, okay? How many marriages do you know? Marriage is a good thing from God, right? And the enemy brings something in that twists it. That's where divorce comes from, right? Having children is a good thing, and he brings in something like a prodigal child, and he twists it. So think about the things, and I'm just being very basic, but to think about the deception of our enemy, okay? And the way that, and as we get ready to talk about these idols, I want you to think about what in your life, the good thing that he has brought into your, or God has brought into your life, is the enemy twisting, all right? That's the craftiness of our enemy, all right? Okay, so these 4 that you see there in front of you, you can put up at the top. These are what we call deep idols, and I'm taking that straight from Tim Keller. Okay, so Tim Keller, in his book, Counterfeit Gods, he calls these deep idols, these 4, okay? And let me kind of explain, and this is what I thought was just so, I should probably write him a letter or something and tell him thank you, because I thought this was so cool how it was these 4 idols, right? And I'm going to say how they wrote it in this review I read about it. It says, these deep idols, okay, the 4 that are in front of you, they are motivational drives that we make absolutes, okay? And they seek fulfillment through surface idols like the other stuff, okay, which we're going to get to, so hang tight. So in other words, these 4 idols, these power, control, I just went blank. Comfort and approval. Thank you. Those 4 idols, right? It's almost like, I kind of almost see it like a iceberg, okay? They are at the root of that iceberg, right? They are what is stabilizing this. And what it does is they seek fulfillment in the little things, okay? So your deep idol may be comfort, and it seeks fulfillment through your family, okay? Your deep idol might be power, and it seeks fulfillment through your job. Okay, so when we're talking about, I want those kind of things kind of going through your head, all right? And the more we go through it, it will make a little bit more sense, all right? Okay, let's jump in. Our first deep idol there is power. You can go ahead and go to Luke 18. Our deep idol, the first one that we're going to talk about is power. In Luke 18, and some of this I may kind of skip around just because for the sake of time. Luke 18, verse 18, it says, a certain ruler asked Jesus here, good teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. And you know the commandments, do not commit adultery, don't murder, don't steal, don't falsely testify, honor your father and mother. And he replied, verse 21, I have kept all these things from my youth. And Jesus heard this. He said to him, you still lack one thing. Sell everything that you have, distribute the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. And what do we know? Verse 23, when he heard these things, he became very sad, for he was extremely rich. Okay, from that story, and I'm sure it's familiar to you, we know that money was what the rich young ruler had, right? But money meant power. Okay, do you see the iceberg? So the iceberg down here, his root idol was power. And it manifested itself through his money, right? Because he was not, Jesus said, I love how, he says, he says, I've done all these things. And he's like, yeah, I specifically left out one that you have not done. Because Jesus knew. He's not going to walk away from the thing that brings him fulfillment. So we know that. So let's talk for a minute. What else can the deep idol of power look like? And if you want to just, as I'm saying, because each one of these I'm going to throw some things out. If something comes to your mind for you, I want you to jot it down. What could be a deep idol of power? What could a deep idol of power look like? Instead of money for this guy, what could it look like? What about that leadership role that you always say yes to? That thing that you're gifted with being able to lead well, maybe you even have the spiritual gift of leadership or administration, and you're good at it, but you always say yes to every role, okay? Which we know at some point is not going to be healthy, all right? What about compromising to win? What about your insatiable desire to win? And it didn't matter if we're talking a board game or if we're talking, driving down Southwest Parkway, right? but you compromise who you are to win. Okay, that could be what it looks like. What about pushing aside loving people to control people? And that's not so much, we're going to talk in a minute about the idol of control, but when you think about the idol of power, that person whose idol is power is no longer concerned about the heart of that person, right? It's about how can I make sure that person, I have power over that person. Now, I want you to think outside the box. It's really easy for us to go, believe me, when I did this, I was like, oh, I can totally see this person. Right? It's real easy for us to go, these are the sexual abusers. These are the ones who victimize children. And yes, 100%, right? But I want you to think outside the box. When has there been a time when you have either compromised or you have so wanted to win or you have so wanted to be in that role that you will compromise what it means just to have that power? Second thing we're going to talk about, what bleeds out with this idol? Okay? Think about it. Remember, we said every idol bleeding out has to happen. What bleeds out for this idol? What about valuable relationships with people? If your idol is power, you can't have valuable relationships with people, right? And that's the thing that will bleed out, right? And maybe you're thinking of somebody that you know and not trying to be tacky, but you're like, that's why nobody really wants to be around her. Because we feel like there's so much power there that she's trying to obtain. You know what that looks like, right? What else could bleed out? What about fulfilling connection? You can't connect in a healthy way with anyone if that power is motivating you. And then what else bleeds out? Your energy level, your health. Okay. Next week, just a little preview. Jen's going to come up and talk about uncluttering our health. I'm sure that's going to step on all of our toes, right? But how are you not taking care of yourself physically because that root idol of power makes you worn out, right? So, what do we replace this idol with? Remember I said you can't just remove it, we have to replace it. I want you to look at verse 22. How does Jesus respond to this guy? He tells him, hey, you still lack one thing. Sell everything that you have and distribute the money to the poor. And then the second part, and you will have, my version says, abundant treasure in heaven. How does Jesus respond to how do we replace the idol of power? We already have everything that we need, and our treasure is not on this earth. Right? We already have everything that we need. I love that Cheyenne just touched on Psalms 23, and we just went through it in my life group. We literally have no want. So trying to reach that goal of being the most powerful, right? We already have everything that we need. And I love that he says, and your treasure, guess what, dude? You're going to be poor here on this earth, but your treasure in heaven, you can't even explain it, right? So that's how Jesus responds, and that's what you replace power with. All right, let's go to control. Go to Genesis 16. We're going to kind of hop back and forth, so forgive me. Genesis 16. And I'm going to do some summary in here just for the sake of time because the story is a little bit long, and it'll be familiar. It's not going to be anything that you're going to not know. But what does this deep idol of control look like? Okay, so we're Genesis 16, I'm going to read 1 through 4. So Sarai, Abram's wife, had not borne him any children, and she had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, see here, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. I'm asking you to go to the bed of my maid so that she can bear you a child. Perhaps I will obtain children by her. And Abram listened to Sarah and did as she said. I love that. It kind of makes me want to ask Abram about that when we get to heaven. Don't you love that God just totally, he threw you under the bus on that one? But that's what you did. You just said, okay. Verse 3, after Abram had lived in Canaan 10 years, Abram's wife Sarah took Hagar and the Egyptian maid and gave her to her husband Abram to be his secondary wife. He went into the bed of Hagar, and she conceived. And when she realized that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And I don't know if your says this, but the contempt there is regarding Sarai as insignificant because of her infertility. So basically Hagar's like, I got you, right? If you were here, I guess about a year and a half ago, I taught a lesson on Hagar. I mean, she had her own. I know a lot of times we feel sorry for her, but she kind of had this thing of like, hey, look at me. You know, I was able to do what you couldn't. Okay, so I'm going to summarize kind of the rest of what's going on. The rest of chapter 16, if you don't know this story. So Hagar now has bragging rights, right? She's able to say, hey, this is who I am. Sarai blames Abram for Hagar being a jerk, right? There's a part in there where she's like, she's such a jerk, right? Abram gives Sarai rights to be a jerk back, okay? So there's this whole cat fight, right? It's really good. Go read it. Hagar gets scared and she runs, right? She's out of here. And then there's a good part, of course, of God doing his thing, which we'll touch on in a minute, all right? Okay, so now move over to Genesis 21. Okay, so this is still going, right? This whole thing between Sarai and Hagar. All right, Genesis 21, go to verse 15. Oh, okay, hang on. Let me summarize 9 through 14 real quick, okay? So she runs off. Hagar has Ishmael, okay? That's her son, right? And I put down the jerk behavior runs in the family, okay? Because Ishmael is a jerk to Isaac. So Isaac is Sarai's, okay, if you remember. Ishmael is Hagar's. And Ishmael's just a jerk, right? Just like their mamas. I mean, it's like it just runs in the family, right? And so God gives direction, and you can read in there, okay? This is 9 through 14 of Genesis 21. God gives direction to Abram to tell Hagar to just go on. I'm going to take care of her. Okay, God speaks that. All right. So now go to verse 15 of 21. When the water in the skin was all gone, they had no water. This is Hagar and her son Ishmael. Hagar abandoned the boy under one of the bushes, and she went and sat down opposite him, about a bow shot away, for she said, do not let me see the boy die. And as she sat down opposite him, she raised her voice and wept. God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said, what troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy from where he is resting. Get up, help the boy up, and hold him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation. All right. So here's the deal. For both these women, what did the deep idol of control look like? Well, it meant basically being able to provide a son for Abram. Okay, and if you've studied the Old Testament, you know that. That was a real big thing for women. Is you felt that significance was there if you were able to provide, especially a son, right? So for both Sarai and Hagar, even though Hagar had been given to Abram through Sarah, right? But both of them had this competitive thing and control. They were able to control the satisfaction of Abram, right? Because of what they were able to give, all right? So let's look at this deep idol of control. What else can the deep idol of control look like? I want you to think about yourself. What can the deep idol of control look like? I'm going to throw a couple things out here. Parenting to prevent bad things from happening to your kids. None of us would ever do that, right? But we know that girl. Basically protect, and we have helicopter moms. We have all the names for them, right? But when you think about it, it's kind of it's that whole thing of I'm going to parent to prevent my kids from having to endure anything bad, all right? Controlling that situation. What else could it look like? Structure that paralyzes. So structure your entire, and whether you got something out of the environment talk that Jen gave or the time or whatever, where the structure that you have and you maintain is not beneficial. In fact, it's starting to paralyze not just you but your family. All right, and believe me, I wrote that one for myself, so just know. What about cleanliness and tidiness that fosters fear? Can your kids be messy? Whew, mine can't. I'll just lay it out there. Can you go to a restaurant and feel like we can just hang out and it's okay if people act, and there's mess and that kind of thing? Or is there this cleanliness about and this control, again, at the bottom, right, that comes out as I like everything to be clean, but what it is it's fostering fear in your kids or your husband or your roommate. All right? What bleeds out for this idol? Okay? This deep idol of control. What has to bleed out for this idol? Valuable connection. All right? In fact, and I have had this. I mean, Ann and I was sharing this with Ann before she left, and she was like, "Oh, like every one of them." I was like, "I know. I've got good examples from my life in every one of them." And this thing of control, I've had that whole thing where I don't feel the freedom to connect to people because I can't control the way that you feel about me. Okay, that's a control, right? That's me trying to control how you feel. Well, that what bleeds out is valuable connection. What else bleeds out? Intentionality and purpose. Are you able to be completely intentional in your relationships, at your job, in your family, whatever it is? Are you able to be completely intentional, right? Or are you trying, when you've got this control thing and that's what you're worshiping? It's hard. Again, I think what else bleeds out is our energy. How many of us are worn out? Because how many of us have figured out there's no control? We have none, right? But it's this fighting back and forth with ourselves. So we are bleeding out energy. We're bleeding out our health. We're bleeding out, these things. That's the kind of stuff, because that idol will always require sacrifice. So what do we replace this idol with? This is interesting. I want you to go back to 21:18. It's what I just ended with, right? The very last phrase, I will make him a great nation. And he's talking about Ishmael, all right? And so God is consoling, basically comforting Hagar, like, hey, you're going to be okay. Like, and this is one of those mysteries of like, God allowed, it gets our mind going crazy thoughts. But I love that he swooped in. That doesn't even make sense. But he came in and he comforted her and said, hey, guess what? It's not just about Isaac. Now, Isaac is the child of the promise, and he is going to be the father of a great nation. But I'm going to take care of Ishmael, and he's going to be a great nation. Go back to chapter 16 real quick, if you just a couple pages back. In 16:10, he said it. The angel of the Lord said, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that you will have too many to count. He's talking to Hagar, all right? And then in 21:13, he said it again. I will make a great nation of Ishmael, the son of the maid, because he is your descendant. God was saying that to Abram and saying, hey, I'm going to take care of her. So here's the deal. What do we replace the idol of control with? God will make me great. God will take care of all of those details. Now, I mean great, as in Jamie's name gets louder, and it's not. We know it's not about us. But I'm telling you, if you have that idol of control, your eyes are focused on that control, right? And we need to take that off and replace it with the fact that God says, Jamie, I've got this. And I will make Ishmael a great nation, even though right now he's laying under a bush about to die. All right, so girls, help me, keep me accountable, and I'm going to keep you accountable. Let's let go of that idol, replace that idol of control with who God is and his control. All right, let's go to comfort. And go to John 4. Very familiar story, I'm sure, to most of you. I really do love this one. All right, we're in John 4, verse 7. A woman from Samaria came to drink water. And Jesus is there, and he says, give me a drink. And we know Jesus went for an intentional purpose, so he knew who he was talking to. For his disciples had gone into the city to buy food. Verse 9. The Samaritan woman asked him, how is it you being a Jew ask a Samaritan woman for a drink? And Jesus answered, if you knew God's gift and who it is who says, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Verse 11, she said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and this well is deep. How are you going to get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well, and he used to drink from it himself and his sons and his cattle? And Jesus answered her, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. But the water that I give him will become in him a spring of water, continually flowing, bubbling within him to eternal life. Verse 15, the woman said to him, sir, give me that water so I won't get thirsty, nor have to come all the way here to draw. At this, Jesus said, go, call your husband and come back. And the woman said, I don't have a husband. Jesus said, you are correct that you do not have a husband. For you have 5 husbands, and the man you are now living with is not your husband. You have said this truthfully. The woman said, sorry, I just lost my, okay, I'm ending there. Yeah, for you said this truthfully, all right? And there's more. You want to read the rest of it. So for this Samaritan woman, and I'm sure you know this story, that how many of you, well, just pause for a minute. How many of you have seen The Chosen's of that scene? Is that one of the most amazing? Has anyone else seen it? Good night of that scene. If you haven't seen, go see that scene. That's incredible. So he goes to this he has a purpose for going to this well, and he's talking to her, right? And he says, hey, this whole water thing, right? So for the Samaritan woman, I want you to think about what meant comfort for her. And we know, when he says, yeah, you've had 5 husbands, and there's even, people have speculated that she may have even been at one time a prostitute and that kind of thing. But he's like, so when you think of the word comfort, for the Samaritan woman, it was a romantic relationship, okay? That meant comfort for her. And I want you to think about, and man, I plan on one day going on a trip with Cheyenne not back to Israel, because I've never been. But back in that place, and especially back in that time, girls, like being a single female, they weren't rocking the corporate world like single females are now, okay? I mean, you look at these girls, you go to Dallas, you go to these big cities where there's a higher population of single, females, and they're just rocking it, right? You watch a sitcom and every, just incredible rock star in a corporate world is single, right? Because, that's just how it is. But back then, we know that that's not the case, right? In fact, they were destitute if they were single. So don't you know, for her, comfort meant I have to be loved enough to be taken care of, all right? And isn't it, I'm about to go too fast. Hang tight, all right? So what else can the deep idol of comfort look like? I want you to jot something down that you think about. When you think about the deep idol of comfort, or maybe you go, dadgum, I know exactly what it is for me. What about that warm cup of coffee? Or that cocktail at night? Or that afternoon run to Dairy Queen for the ice cream? Now, I'm not saying that any of that is bad within itself. All right? We're all of the age that we can drink if we want to have a drink. We all are good. If you like coffee, you are my people, right? And dadgum, ice cream is just good, especially from Dairy Queen. So in and of itself, that is not bad. But when I run to that coffee cup, I just had one over there. And it represents the comfort that my heart needs. That's an idol of comfort. When I go, after I get the kids to bed, and I am of the age, and I can have a drink, or I can have a cookie, or I can eat an entire cake. Because, way to go, Jamie, you just mommed for a whole day. Good job. And it brings me that comfort. That's the idol of comfort. Do you see it? Yeah. What about that friend or that spouse or that boyfriend that has become an idol of comfort? Because he meets that need, she meets that need, she says the right things, he is acting the right way, they give me, do you see what I'm saying? It's that idol of comfort. Again, what I am running to make myself feel better. What about, I thought about this one. What about being a recluse or being a homebody? What about being a busybody? Really, you're either love to be home and that's your place and you don't ever get out and I just like to be a homebody, or you're like me and crazy town and I don't stop. You got me. And I'm telling you, whatever we run to, because sometimes I run to those things to keep my schedule going so that I don't have to sit still and be quiet, right? That's a comfort. Y'all are making me feel so much better about myself, so thank you. By y'all just going, I'm like, ah. So what bleeds out for this idol? What bleeds out for this idol of comfort? What about productivity for the kingdom? If all I do is sit there with my comfortable cup of coffee, run into all my things with my cute cup of coffee, I'm not being productive for the kingdom. I'm making myself feel busy so that I don't have to deal with things, right? What about intentionally serving and loving others? If I'm about myself, and I think us that, and I pointed at Cheyenne just because she and I have talked about this before, like, I think us that enjoy doing things and being out and doing things for others, a lot of times we can go, hey, I am not serving myself. I'm not serving myself. And I'm not speaking for Cheyenne, I'm speaking for me, in that sometimes I take such comfort in that Jesus says, hey, I need you to sit down and let's deal with this thing. You guys have been around me long enough, you know that he has to sit me on my rear with nothing to do to get that, right? And again, what else bleeds out? Our health, right? And really that was one of the reasons Brooke brought up when I kind of shared with her what we were talking about, about Regen. And I thought, because and like I said, I've never been there, but I can imagine what kind of sin traps have started by simply me just feeling comfortable and not wanting to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? All right. What do we replace this idol with? Again, we're not just removing it, but replacing it. Go to verse 14. But whoever drinks the water, and I'm going to read verse 14 from the Amplified. I mean, that's what I'm reading from anyway, but I'm going to read all the words because there's some rich words there. But whoever drinks the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. But the water that I give him will become in him a spring of water. And it says here, satisfying his thirst for God, welling up or continually flowing or bubbling within him to eternal life. What does Jesus respond with? I have all the satisfaction you need. I have all the satisfaction you need. Girls, we know that. We know this story, and that's basically what he was saying to her is, hey, I know you have run to men to get your comfort. I know you have run to be a wife and to get that significance and to get that comfort, but guess what? I'm going to give you something that is all the satisfaction that you need. And that's why, you know what's beautiful about that? Is he can give me a cup of coffee and a sweet friend or a really great, incredible husband. And I can enjoy these things that that can be comforts, but it's because my satisfaction and my comfort is not in that. Does that make sense? I want you to look at one more thing with this. Look at the significance of verse 15 going into 16, okay? Verse 15, she says, sir, give me this water so that I will not get thirsty. And then verse 16, he says, go call your husband and come back. Do you see that he called out what she was trying to satisfy her thirst with? She's like, hey, give me that water. And he's like, go call your husband. Because you've been trying to satisfy that thirst through him and through all 5 of them, right? And girls, I want you to listen to the Spirit tonight. I mean, because he revealed things, and I know he's still going to tonight in the shower where we have a lot of talks. But what is he calling out in you right now? Or what is he going to call out in the next couple of days that he's asking you, hey, I want you to deal with this, right? Because you are running to that person or that thing to give you that comfort, and all your comfort and satisfaction is in me. All right, let's do the last one. Approval. Jump back over to Genesis. Sorry for the back and forth. Genesis 29. And we're going to read verse 31 in just a minute, but let me kind of get you up to speed, and most of you will know this story. Genesis 29, first part of this story basically is Jacob is looking for a wife, right? Jacob is the son of Isaac and Rebekah, right? He stops at this well, he makes conversation, and who would you know, or some conversation with these guys, and wouldn't you know, they know his uncle Laban, all right? And then all of a sudden, the haughty Rachel, his actual cousin, which, we know in the Old Testament, they had to do that thing, no big deal. But Rachel shows up, she's going to water the sheep, right? She's a shepherdess, she's going to water the sheep. Look at verse 11, just because this is funny. When I was summarizing this, look at verse 11. It says, then Jacob kissed Rachel, and he raised his voice, and he wept. I was like, that's so funny. He was pumped, he kissed her, and he cried. I was like, I love that. Like, yeah, I don't think Randy Wood did that when he met me. Like, that would have been really a cool way to greet me, Just go ask him. Y'all that know him, ask him if he cried when he saw me, but he didn't. So Jacob desires to work for Rachel's hand. We know that. Laban tricks him. We know that part. He gives Leah, the older sister, first, right? And Jacob works for some more and gets Rachel. Okay, so now we're caught up to verse 31. Verse 31, it says, now when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he made her able to bear children, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and gave birth to a son and named him Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has seen my humiliation and suffering, now my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son and said, because the Lord heard that I am unloved, he has given me this son. So she named him Simeon. She conceived again and gave birth to a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me. How sad is that? For I have given him 3 sons, and therefore she named him Levi. Again she conceived and gave birth to a 4th son, and she said, now I will praise the Lord. So she named him Judah, and she stopped bearing children. All right, so then go on into chapter 30, okay? And I'm just going to kind of catch us up, all right? So we see that whole part about her having all these kids, all right? And in chapter 30, we're not going to read, but I'm going to summarize it here. Basically, Rachel pulls a Sarai on Jacob about not having kids. And that first part of chapter 30, she just goes crazy on Jacob about, I can't have kids. And how did it, and all this stuff. She pulls a Sarai. Rachel gives her maidservant, and she has several kids with Jacob. Rachel feels satisfied. Okay, good. Here's the deal. Leah gets mad. Right? Leah gives her maidservant, and she has several kids with Jacob, and then I just put good grief, right? I mean, I did on my own notes, I said that. Because it was just like, and I know the story, but seriously, we've got Rachel and Leah, and they're all having kids, and then they're giving their maidservants, and it's just, and then Jacob's just like, ooh. And that's what I've always wondered. I've always just been like, you never see like, how'd this make Jacob feel? He's like, I don't need feelings. I'm just getting to have children with all these women. Anyway. We fill in the blank. Woo! Okay. So I want you to think about this. Again, it's the idol of approval. For Rachel, her looks meant approval, right? We know in that story, she was the better looking sister. She was beautiful, right? He wept, right? He wept when he saw her. Okay, so we know for her, she had the attractive looks, and that gave her approval. That was her idol of approval. Not that it was wrong that she was beautiful, but she found approval in it. For Leah, her first to give children meant approval. All right, so she may have not been as attractive as her younger sister, but hey, she was able to have kids first. And we know in that time, that, again, we talked about that earlier, that was a big deal, right? It was a really big deal. And then the fighting back and forth with who could give Jacob the most babies meant approval, right? Don't you know? It's like they had a tally marks here, and put our maidservants and all. And basically what that meant is if Jacob has my baby, I will be approved. If Jacob has my baby we read in that Leah actually named one of her children because maybe now my husband will be attached to me. Girls, that hits us in a level that some of you may have hit even harder. You know what it's like for a man to look at you and say, I don't want to be attached to you. That's deep, right? So this deep idol of approval, of fighting for that. So what else can the deep idol of approval look like? And I am a pleaser by nature. So this one was a little bit too easy. Compromising to please. That deep idol of approval can look like me compromising who I am or what I feel is right. Or I know that we're not really supposed to talk about people without them being right there, but it was just easy because we were all sitting at dinner and it was just easy and I had a really good story. That whole compromising to please that person, right? And again, that deep seed of I have to have approval. I have to have that approval. What else could it look like? Keeping everyone happy. I'm not going to make you raise your hand if you struggle with that. But there are some of us who it is just, I have this deep-seated idol of approval, and it comes out by me making sure that everything goes smoothly so everybody's happy. I have a friend that I literally was talking to today, and she was talking about just personality-wise how she's been struggling with this whole of this deep-seated desire for peace, and the way that comes out is making sure that everybody acts right. And so she will she'll kind of go over here and she'll fix this and she's admitted it, and she's like, I'm breaking free from that. And you know what that's like if you have spun so many plates and coordinated so many things so that nobody is mad. That deep seed, that deep idol of approval. What else could it look like? Your own body. Maybe you've struggled with an eating disorder. Maybe you have an addiction to something else. And you know what it's like to, I started with this thing, and I got approval because I looked like this, and now this thing has now got control, right? That's what that idol of approval can look like. So what bleeds out for this idol? Who we are, right? That's one of the things. One of the things that bleeds out for this idol is I lose who I am. If Jamie, and I've done this, if Jamie is constantly compromising what God has called me to do, to make everybody happy, to make sure everybody's okay, to make sure nobody's fighting and nobody's mad, I'm compromising who God made me to be. And you talk about that's restricting, right? At best, and it's bondage at worst. What else bleeds out? The genuine ability to love and serve others well. Girls, we can't be the hands and feet of Jesus. We cannot be obedient to the greatest commandment to love God and to love people if we are bound to the idol of approval. We can't. We will not be able to do it. And what else can bleed out? Your health, your identity, your security in your own body. Again, looking for those things to make, those people or those things to make, to feed that idol of approval, we will lose who we are. So what do we replace this idol with? You're getting kind of a trend, right? Obviously, it's what God says. Look at chapter 29 and look at verse 31. So Genesis 29:31. I think we started with this one, yeah. Now, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he made her able to bear children. So what's the first thing that God responds to? He responds with compassion. So instead of this idol of approval, we replace it with God's compassion. And maybe someone needed to hear that tonight. That God is not disappointed with you. He doesn't think you are too big or too small or too tall or too short or too this or too that. He has compassion on you, right? He saw Leah and he took care of that. And then go over to chapter 30, verse 17. 30:17. God listened and answered the prayer of Leah, and she conceived and gave birth. He listened. He has attention. He doesn't just have compassion, but he has attention to you. Instead of you running to these other people or these other things for the approval and to make myself feel okay, I have the God of the universe, y'all, who says, Jamie, I made you and you're perfect. And listen, guess what? I'm also listening to your heart. I'm also listening to your heart. That's a big deal. So, as we close out, I want you to write this question on there. Where are your eyes? Your eyes. Where are your eyes? In other words, what are you gazing at? If we had a mantle up here and I had these idols, right? Power, control, approval, comfort. When we put those idols in our lives and they are there, our gaze, our eyes are on that idol, right? Because again, go back to the definition of idol, anything that competes for the worthiness of God. So our eyes are not on God, they're on that idol, right? And so what I'm going to do, and I'll kind of explain it, and then I'll go. I gave you at the bottom of that paper just the lyrics, and one verse and the chorus to the old hymn called Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. And I'm going to play kind of a live version of and they just sing that for a couple of, and I think it would be a really beautiful way to end this. Because here's the beauty of it. Do you see, if you go back over all four of those idols, all four of them, right, replaced an idol with the way that Jesus and God responds. Isn't that beautiful? That when my eyes are not on approval and they are on Jesus, my gaze is on that. Look at the lyrics of the song. One of my favorite lyrics of all time. And the things of earth will grow strangely dim. You want to know a powerful way to pray for your kids or your nieces? I pray every day for my 5 nieces. I pray for my kids too, don't worry. But they have a whole nother level. But I have 5 nieces, ranging from almost 18 to 8. And every day I pray this prayer for them, that the things of this world will grow strangely dim. What a prayer, right? Because guess what? The only way that the things of this world, power, control, approval, and comfort, the only way that those things will become dim is when my eyes are on Jesus. And I know that seems so simple, y'all, but we got to get our gaze off of those things and on him. So I'm going to play that song. If you want to jot down notes, if you want to close your eyes, if you want to sing. And then I'm going to pray us out, okay? Or I'm going to pray. And then if you want, we still have about 10, 15 minutes. If you want to, at your table, 2 questions you can answer. If you're like, I got to go, totally fine, and y'all want to talk about something different, that's okay. 2 questions I thought of that I didn't write on there. What deep idols do you need to deal with? And if he's shown you how to deal with it, what is it? Are you being obedient? Okay? So even if that's just something you want to kind of go over, what deep idol would you say tonight I need to start with dealing with? And if he has shown you how, or I need to pray about how, God, am I going to deal with that idol? Okay? Feel free to stay at your table and do that. So God, we just thank you that when our gaze is on you, it doesn't matter how pretty that idol is. It doesn't matter how good that idol makes me feel. It doesn't matter how many girlfriends we have who serve that idol. It doesn't matter what our husband's doing, what our kids are doing. When our gaze is on the God of the universe who intimately wants to love and hold me, the things of this world will grow strangely dim. Your face is beautiful. Your way with us is beautiful. And I pray we would not compromise who we are for the sake of an idol that we're willing to bleed out for. And in turn, we will turn our eyes on you. Let you deal with those areas. If that means getting help, getting professional help, if that means coming to Regen, if that means talking to a friend over coffee and having some accountability, whatever that looks like for you, whatever you're telling us, whatever that looks like, I pray that we are obedient and we carry it out. We love you. Thank you for being so faithful to us. In your precious name we pray. Amen.